Hey little queen, so today is Who is Mr. Robot recap. I am also wearing one of my shirts that I had made for me. I put this little thing. It is Elizabeth Short, also known as the Black Dahlia. And I basically put trust no one. I don't know, I thought I'd put that in there and it kind of reminds me a little bit about Mr. Robot and some other stuff. I don't know if I'll talk about it in this episode, maybe another one as I find more connections. Um, but basically, this episode, Sam Esmail had tweeted on Twitter. If you don't follow him or if you don't follow me, I also like retweet a lot of stuff from Mr. Robot. You can also possibly follow Rami Malek online on Twitter. I know Claire Fellows really keeps up with anything Rami Malek, and also that includes Mr. Robot and Rami Malek's role, I think, in Buster's Malahart, and he did land another role. I talked about it. I don't know if it was the last video or the video before. Um, Again, I'll link down below, like I have in the past two videos, the Mr. Robot VR experience that they showed at San Diego Comic Con, and also the Careful Massacre of the Bourgeoisie. And besides Sam Esmail basically saying to watch tonight's episode on TV, if you're like the kind of person who streams it, they also wanted you to tune into the commercials that were playing in between. And I'll insert some pictures right here. And these pictures show that basically Mr. Robot took like a little like twist on us. And I had seen these pictures from behind the scenes, and I was kind of like wondering. I was like, I wonder what this is. Like, I knew it was going to be something referencing to Elliot's background and stuff like this. But again, you know, if you saw tonight's episode or if you still haven't seen it, you basically will know or not know what this all means. But this is again episode 6, and this was 2.4 Master Slave. So it is a very interesting episode to say the least, obviously, because I'm pretty sure it threw some people off a little. Just a little. Again, also, if you do want me to email Mr. Robot and all those people to make Funko Pops, this is Lady Gaga from American Horror Story The Countess. I got this one sent to me. I can email them and be like, hey, we need some Mr. Robot Funko Pops. And also, please subscribe, like, rate, share, comment down below. It would really, really, really help me out. Also, but let's get into this recap, finally. So, with, as always, any preview that comes on before each episode usually touches upon certain episodes or events in previous episodes in the previous season, or just maybe, you know, something that we may have missed that are like little Easter eggs building up for another thing later on, maybe in like season 3, 4, or 5. Because, you know, Sam Esmail did say 5 seasons. Who knows if he's going to keep up with, like, you know, that like a lockdown of 5 seasons only. Maybe he'll extend it 1 or 2, who knows, but 5, you know, we're just playing with time here, as they say. And I think we are halfway done with the season, almost, or a little bit close to. But basically we see the FBI and F Society, we see the computer, and how we want to hack the FBI. Elliot and also Darlene basically saying how they need Angela to do this. And then we see Angela and her boyfriend when he was basically secretly recording her and stuff like that in the previous episodes. And then when that old guy, Price, was basically at the meeting with those 3 people in DC, I believe, and they're talking about the bank holidays and stuff, and they want to have that bailout and stuff. He was basically having a meeting for a bailout to get them out of this like recession, so to speak, that they caused. And then we do see Darlene's boyfriend with the CD when, you know, Ollie, Angela's ex, bought the CD and everything like this, and this pops up again later on in this episode. Of course, we see the shooting from previously, and then we see when Elliot gets beats up, and then we just go to New York City. And this is what kind of, I guess, starts off the throw off for us as the audience. So basically, we go to an old commercial kind of a way, or introduction to USA, the network, and stuff like this. And it's like, oh, like, you know, like tonight, blah, 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 like USA, you know how like those old throwbacks are, or I would say the old time kind of television, the way it was set up, or anything like that. That's basically what we saw. And then they're like, today on like Word Up Wednesday and blah 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 and stuff like this. And then again, it opens up with a very confusing, almost like sitcom, I believe would be the word, almost. It kind of reminded me of a little bit of like an SNL, but obviously like any old show where they had like a live audience and stuff like this. That's basically what we were watching. So we see Elliot and family in the car, and they are on their annual Alderson road trip, basically, or vacation, family vacation, so to speak. And there are laughs in the background, and that's what I mean by like old time, you know, like live audience and stuff, I guess, also like SNL, where you can hear the audience laughing in the background, you know, like reactions to like what is going on the screen. Mr. Robot is basically saying like, oh, like this is for some change, and you know, you're gonna thank me later and stuff, and we're just gonna be taking on the world together. And this is kind of referencing how, I guess, in a way, Elliot became Mr. Robot to some extent, and he wanted to change the world because that was the whole basically introduction to his Mr. Robot with the first season where he says, I want to change the world and everything like this, and like there's an evil hand that controls the world and stuff, and it basically wants to give the world back to the people or anything like that. And then Mr. Robot makes a joke as Mr. Alderson saying like, "Oh yeah, like cancer and stuff. Like I may go out later," and he like coughs in his hand, he has blood, and there's just laughing and like. Then Elliot is like, "Oh, what is that laughing like? Where is that coming from?" And then Darlene is like, "Oh, like Mom, Elliot's hearing voices again." So it's very like sketch comedy stuff. So you like see SNL and stuff like this. So you kind of know if you have an idea if you haven't seen the episode. And then Darlene is also like, oh, if you keep that up, like, Dad's gonna push you out the window and stuff again. And then he's like, hey, you gotta respect me, like, you know, like, I'm not dead yet and stuff. And Darlene is like, well, not for long, because Darlene does have that, like, catty attitude, so to speak. And then she's playing on her Game Boy and stuff, and Elliot looks down at it. And it's basically like a violent game, you know? And Elliot is, I guess, a bit jaded from being pushed out a window and getting beat up by his parents, and his mom being a little bit abusive and stuff like this. And then also, you know, something is wrong with his head. That's what we saw in some of the first episodes of the season. And they say, hey, like, you know, eyes forward, kiddo. Like, you know, you can't, like, don't look at that, basically. And it's kind of funny because maybe he had seen some violence aside from being abused himself. And that also may have led to this kind of mental breakdown, split personality disorder, and stuff like this. And then we go to basically the introduction to Mr. Robot. And again, I'll insert the picture just so you can see what I'm talking about. It kind of remind me of like Full House or something. So that reminded me of like a Full House kind of a deal, so to speak. And then we basically go to, you know, each character being introduced. Basically as a new character, and I guess Elliot's like mental state, you know, whatever he's going through right now. This is like another trip or not, you know. He's kind of falling down the rabbit hole like Alice in Wonderland or something. And then we basically see, you know, Darlene and Angela. She works at an Evil Corp like convenience store, and just basically random things because we know Gideon was dead, and it says Gideon dead on a newspaper, but he's reading a newspaper and he's kind of like just in a random bench and stuff. And then there's like a family beach picture, and that kind of reminded me of The Conjuring when they show the picture of the family and they're at the beach. Like it basically kind of like was the same thing, so to speak. You know what I mean? Have you seen The Conjuring? And then we go to that gas station with Angela and stuff. Angela was crying at a funeral for her mother before this and everything like that. And then we see like the Evil Corp logo again. It's like an Evil Corp convenience store, so to speak, gas station almost. And then again, Elliot is told to look ahead and stuff, and then it's kind of funny because we do see some abuse, and not only was Elliot like on the receiving end of that abuse from both parents, but it does seem Darlene a little bit, but obviously she probably wasn't thrown out windows and like has a morphine addiction and stuff like that. So she just gets slapped, and then she gets like burned on the wrist with a cigarette from the mom, which I thought was kind of funny. And then we hear the Man in the Trunk, the special guest star, which is basically, I guess, like the metaphor, like maybe it is Elliot's subconscious basically saying like, hey, like Tyrell was in the trunk or something like this, like somewhere in between those days that Elliot was, you know, out of it. Like they say after he woke up in Tyrell's car, like maybe Tyrell is in a trunk, or maybe suppose it was gonna be Shayla. You know, I thought it was gonna be like a connection again. It's like, ugh, this hoe. But no, it's basically Tyrell. And then we go and see, I believe he's a Muppet at the gas station. Alf. I don't know if he's a Muppet. But basically Angela's like the clerk there, and then Mr. Robot and his wife walk in, and they're like, oh, like Elliot like put stuff in the bag and everything. So they're basically robbing the station. Angela's like, oh, like you better tell them not to do that, or else I'm gonna like arrest them and stuff like this. And then they basically they mace Angela, and I'm just like, oh my god, like who would just mace Angela? Like I just thought of like, oh lord, that was funny. And then we basically see that Elliot kind of has like ugh against Mr. Robert for doing that, because it's like, Angela's my friend, like why would you do that and stuff. It's like, no, like she's one of them because she's working for Evil Corp now, and obviously she is when she's working with Price and Evil Corp, she has that position. And then he's like, remember what I said, one for Alderson, and then Elliot's like, Alderson for one and stuff like that. So they have something going on, and it's they leave the E-Mart basically. And then we go to Darlene. She wakes up, she's in the car, and then she's like, oh, I had the weirdest dream that mom like slugged me in the face, and then her mom just like knocks her out again and stuff. So this scene basically goes on for about 20-22 minutes and stuff. It's basically straight on, and then they get a flat tire and stuff. He's like, oh, like I need my spare tire, blah blah blah. And then he sees basically Tyrell in the trunk, and he tells Mr. Robot like, oh, like you expect me not to believe like no one's there, like enough, like what is this and everything like this. And then we go to commercial, and it's like stay tuned for like whatever and stuff. And then let's see an eCorp online commercial. Now, if you on Twitter, if you do follow Mr. Robot, obviously there's Hacking Robot, which was the basically premiere and finale after show that we'll see at the end, and then also that is, I guess, an extension of their Mr. Robot, I guess, empire, so to speak, is that we have eCorp Messaging. I believe is a new Twitter account that they had made for stuff, and I believe there's going to be like a new messaging app for basically eCorp, like they say, like more promotional stuff and such. And also, I'll like insert a picture. Like if you go to whoismrrobot.com, this is what it looked like Bud Light commercial and stuff like this, like old time, like you can tell the frame doesn't fit the size of the TV, as they say. And then also we see like, oh, USA all night, like this is what's coming up next, and it's the Careful Massacre of the Bourgeoisie and stuff. And then we go to see like the stock crash and everything like this, and it's like, oh, since like whatever year, eCorp has been there for you, like trust in eCorp. It's like an old like eCorp commercial, like the beginning and everything like this. And then we go to basically the policeman showing up because they're gonna get pulled over. And like I said, this is Gideon, and obviously Gideon is dead. And I kind of was wondering if that meant like, oh, like the police are gonna go after like Gideon's killer, and they're gonna find out more and go to him. And they're like, oh, like he's like, you wouldn't happen to have a kidnapped executive like in your trunk or whatever or something like this. And they're like, oh no. And then we see Alf in the car, and he's like, oh no, and he like hits Gideon. He runs him over, so Gideon is dead yet again. And then they basically have to keep on driving. They're driving. They hit like a bump, and the trunk opens, and Tyrell like basically is like out. Like he's kind of free to the world because the trunk is open, so whoever's behind them will see him. And then Mr. Robot and Elliot are basically like walking and stuff, and then he's like, "Oh, like now you're hearing and seeing things, Elliot. Like there's no one in the trunk, and like you're hearing all these voices," which is like the laughter of the audience, like us. I guess it mimics us, kind of laughing like, "What is this?" when we saw it, because it was a very different twist on Mr. Robot, so to speak. And then basically Tyrell is dragged back into the trunk. They pick him up by his ankles and stuff. And he basically like says that the lies are usually to protect yourself and stuff, and sometimes they're useful and everything like this. And he basically also just bashes Tyrell's head in or whatever, because Tyrell's like, oh, like they can sometimes help with covering up murder or whatever and stuff. And then Elliot is kind of realizing in a way, or he thinks he realizes, like, oh, like you've won, like you've taken over and stuff, like I'm buried here, like in his own memories or whatever and stuff. And this kind of, I guess, was a reference to when they were playing the chess game to see who will take full control of Elliot or Mr. Robot, so to speak, since they are the same person. And then he's like, no, this is like a little secret temporary destination. And then he wakes up in the hospital because he tells them, like, like when you got beat up, he's like, they basically were good enough to take you to a hospital and everything like that. And then he's like, now it's just time to take it back. So he wakes up, I guess from like a little mini coma, as they say, in the hospital bed, and he's like wheezing and stuff. And Craig Robinson's character, Ray, is talking about his dog Maxine and how she was coughing and stuff, and basically how she had been dying, and just, I guess in a way, having the death rattle that patients usually do when they're already going through like the stages of death. Not so much like the grieving stages, but if you work in the medical field. And then he's like, I'm pretty sure that Maxine was only breathing because, like, someone else allowed her to breathe. That being, I guess, like, how dogs are so faithful and stuff like this and so attached to us human, like, like their masters. Leading into the title of this episode, she basically kind of becomes a slave to him in a way. And he's basically telling Elliot the same thing, like, you're only breathing because I allowed you to live, so to speak, and like we brought you to the hospital so you wouldn't die. So obviously this shows us that Ray probably has some more, intentions that are probably not good for Elliot, because he did go off looking where he wasn't supposed to. He saw what Ray's website was and everything like that. And then he basically walks out and Alpha's on the TV and he's like, "Oh, democracy is dead" and something and stuff like that. So that is like a very like something Marxist, like I don't know if it was like a response or something like that to like the world. I don't know. If you understand what I mean with that, then you'll know. And then we go to an old school Suits commercial, and Suits is the show that airs before Mr. Robot does. I never like watch it and stuff like that. And then we go to 2 days since like like this crime had happened, and it's a story in the news talking about the FBI shooting that had happened with Dominique Perrault, Grace Gummer's character, and stuff like that. And then we see Malala and Darlene basically, and she's like, "Oh, like now everyone's going to be on high alert, and the FBI is going to be surrounding Evil Corp and stuff like this because it kind of relates to Evil Corp in a way." And then Gideon was shot and stuff, and the Dark Army is basically possibly behind it. I mean, we know because if we do remember when FBI agent Perot was coming down into Beijing, she saw two Dark Army people in the same mask that shot up basically the FBI place going up, flying to America. So obviously, as they were there, they went over there, and they were planning like, hey, what are we gonna do when they come back, etc., etc. And they possibly also got pictures of like, hey, who was at this party, who was the one attending, who was asking for information, who's part of this investigation, anything like that. And then they say teaching Angela, like coding and how to hack in 24 hours is just impossible because, they have a very important plan to hack the FBI and do a lot more than just getting into the FBI. So they're relying on Angela, like she's the only person that has like clearance into Evil Corp, like she works there and stuff, so that's the only way. And since she is in such a high position and with Price and stuff like this, she's basically the only person that they can trust to help possibly get this plan through. And then she's coding with Jack Black and stuff. She's like practicing and stuff, and then we see that the boyfriend basically gets taken away by the Dark Army. And also, I don't know if there's something that happened in between these two things because my AT&T Uverse went out, and I tweeted that it went out and I couldn't watch along with y'all. But two other people also said that their Uverses went out. So if you have AT&T and it goes out, I guess it all goes out for all of us. I don't know, and stuff like that. But I found that out. And then they put a needle basically between like the skin and the nail, so under the nail bed, I suppose, like that. So they put a needle there, and I feel like it's like a truth serum or something like this, because they're basically saying like, oh, like like you're a foot soldier, and like foot soldiers are just supposed to follow orders and blah 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 and stuff. And he's like in the library and everything like that. So he did something, and they basically got him back, like I guess to reassure him who he is. Not to go off doing his things, but also who knows what intentions they have with him. Obviously, the Dark Army works with F Society, but are things falling through? That is the question. And obviously, since he is a Darlene, will he hurt Darlene? Will he hurt Angela? We just don't know how this is all gonna fall through, so to speak. And then we go to basically Dominique Perrault being told that she needs a psychiatric leave. She needs a psych leave for at least a month, And then she's basically saying no, like if this disrupts anything, then like the Dark Army is going to win, because it'll not only disrupt the investigation, but all the people involved, if they're not dead, then they basically have to walk away from everything. Like like if they leave, so does everything else leave. Who knows what will happen behind closed doors if they leave, like if this is something else, if the FBI is working with them. And then she's like, I saw them and stuff, like we're the ones who investigated the hack, and then like where this shooting happened, so it's no coincidence there that they would be shot at and stuff. And then she says basically how the first guy who she shot in the leg shot himself, and how he erased his own history, so to speak, because like he wasn't going to tell, he was going to let himself be captured. That's, I guess, a Dark Army protocol and stuff. And then she's like, the second guy had her like cornered, so to speak, like she just had him, but then he shot himself when like I guess backup arrived, so to speak. And then again, she kind of insists like this is gonna disrupt the investigation. She's like, I get sent home, like everything is left behind, and the whole thing may just fall apart. And with that being said, this reminded me of the Black Dahlia, where they just misplaced all the evidence, and like with Hodel and everything, the LAPD and stuff. That's kind of where I got this like connection from. So it's like, who did it and stuff. Obviously, she has her own like ideas of who it could be. Like, since she said there was no coincidence there, but who knows if the FBI is involved. And then we go to the old guy that Angela talks to, and he's on the phone call, mentioning Beijing and stuff like this, and he says, like, if you do this with China and you don't do the bailout, like, like, you're gonna bankrupt the country, etc., etc., and stuff. And then he basically hangs up, or gets hung up on. And this guy walks in and says like, oh, like we can't like get this call through or whatever. They're not answering or he just won't pick up and stuff. He's like, oh, I'll just keep calling over and over and stuff. And he's like, no, tell the driver to just come pick me up. Like I'm gonna be late for something. And he basically tells them, well, the driver can't get in because there's like a lot of protesters outside. So obviously he can't just walk outside of E Corp because he'll probably get like beat up or something. After with Gideon and everything, a lot of people are like thinking this is like crisis acting and stuff like this. And he's just like, well, whatever. Like, there's protesters everywhere and stuff. And basically says we'll get like the NYPD to basically, in a way, escort him and like get rid of the protesters and stuff like that. And then we go to Jack Black and Malala, and they're kind of watching Angela and stuff. And again, Angela, this always cracks me up. She's always saying those things to herself, and she's like, my success is assured, my success is assured, my success is assured, as she's like coding and practicing her little hacking skills that she just learned. And then Jack Black is like, I don't know, like, this is like the right person to send in. And Darlene is like, well, whatever it takes. Like, if she can't like say this to herself as she's doing the hack or whatever, like, she just needs to like have confidence in herself to complete the hack. And they say again, like, the 23rd floor at lunch hour, she'll do this. It should be like basically empty and whatnot. And then Darlene's boyfriend shows up, and Angela kind of just stares at him, and he kind of like stares at her like, and then his finger is bandaged. I got like, the syringe put under it, the needle and stuff, whatever they injected into him and stuff. And then Darlene is like, oh, like, well, what the heck and stuff. And she's like, oh, like, nothing, I just thought I recognized your friend. She's like, but I don't and stuff. And she's like, I'll just wait for your call when I'm there. So obviously, if you don't remember, Cisco is basically the guy that sold the CD to Ollie, and she realizes that he's the one who kind of initiated the whole E-Corp takedown, and again, she played a bigger part than she really thought now, being an F Society, but then seeing that Darlene's boyfriend is the one that sold the CD, that led to everything to let them being, in a way, blackmailed into hacking and taking down and all this mess that they're in now. And now that she's trying to fight from the FBI to get away, clear her name, like, stuff like that, I guess she finds out that she's more of a tangled mess than she ever thought possible. And then we see the FBI agent Pierrot at a convenience store that she was getting like a sandwich and stuff from the previous episodes. And basically the guy there says like he can't pay the rent for the store and everything, like, there's no money coming in, there's no money to get inventory, etc., etc. Like, those stores basically gonna go out of business eventually because no one is able to afford stuff. Like, money is, I guess, literally running out. Like, there's no paper money in a way, and also people can't use their cards and anything like that. And she's basically, oh, like, well, like, sorry and stuff. And then she's like, well, I might as well take advantage of the place while it's still open. She's like, so how about another turkey sandwich and stuff? And he's just like, yeah, and stuff. And then we see Darlene in a wig. And this reminded me of the girl with the dragon tattoo somewhere near the end when she puts on that blonde wig and stuff. And I don't know if this is like a reference to that. But then, like, she's like in a high-end hotel and stuff. She's like, oh, like, like, hey, girl, like, I'm gonna need some towels and stuff. She calls. And then she's like, oh, I need some conditioner for, like, my hair with all this humidity. And she's basically hacking into a room, close enough to Evil Corp to, kind of guide Angela and stuff over the phone and everything like this and kind of see what she's doing, but close enough to get that Wi-Fi signal, etc., etc. And she's basically, like, stripping the magnetic strip on, like, the lady's card just to walk into a room. It's like that, stuff like that, since she has housekeeping and stuff. And then we also see Angela, and, she logs into the computer and stuff. And then Angela, gets the call, for lunch and stuff. She's like, yeah, and everything like this. And then she goes to the 23rd floor, the FBI are there. Then she just walks on into the bathroom, and that's where she's going to start, like, her little hack and stuff. So she also, calls right away because she's like, oh, like, the script isn't working. And they're like, oh, like, what terminal are you on? And stuff, like, like, just calm down. Like, you got this, Angela. Like, you practice. And then this lady walks in to wash her hands, and Angela's like, because in a way, she probably hears her on the phone, or not, she just hears someone else in the bathroom. Stuff we don't really know, but basically the lady was like, as she's washing her hands, and then she's like, okay, like, like, I'm okay and stuff. And then as she walks out after she, like, finishes, like, basically hacking them in and stuff, this FBI guy is like, oh, are you okay? Like, you were in there for a while and stuff. Like, I've never seen you on this floor or anything. Blah, 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 and stuff. And then she's like, oh, like, and then Darlene's on the phone listening, like, you have to get rid of him and stuff. And he's like, oh, he basically asks her out, like, like, I want to ask you out, so to speak. It's like drinks or, like, something like that, like, you want to go out and stuff. And she's like, oh, like, I'm taking it. He's like, I'm just asking for drinks and everything. And they're going to try to exploit him. They're trying to, like, look him up. They're like, oh, this is the name. He's been, like, in the bureau for, like, a while and stuff like this. And then he's like, this floor is off limits and stuff. He's just like, I just want to know what you're doing here. Everything. And they're like, oh, like he calls his mom a lot and stuff. And they were going to do the same thing that they did at Steel Mountain, where they text the lady from like her husband's phone saying like, oh, like that's what we always feared. But basically like his mom calling him. But he just hangs up and stuff because obviously he's either on his job or just because he's trying to, get it in with Angela. And I thought Angela was going to, be a little hoe and, save the day, but she kind of didn't. And then he's like, so why are you here and stuff? And then he's like, like, I'm gonna tell or something. And then she's like, oh, so that's it, you give up? Like, they give, like, they don't bite back or something, you just gonna walk away? And then she's like, I wanted a little fight from you and stuff. Like, no one ever, like, just gave me a win or something like that. And then she's like, lunch and stuff, because she's like, I'm gonna be busy tomorrow and stuff, but, like, I can meet up and anything like that. And then he basically is like, oh, like, okay and stuff. And she's like, like, she got rid of it. She did something. Because he basically asked her, like, does anybody ever, like, think of asking you out or taking you out when they see you here? And she's just like, it was an awkward situation for her, probably. And then they tell her to find the Ethernet cables, and she has to plug stuff in and wipe her prints and everything like this. And then as she does everything she's supposed to do, she figures out that she lost the Wi-Fi. And they tell her, you have to go to, like, a terminal and stuff. And she's like, no, like, I don't want to do it. Like, I did what I'm supposed to and stuff. And then Darlene again reminds her, like, if you don't do this, basically, not only can we not, like, do what we said, like, wipe away your evidence, basically your records and stuff, and any involvement that you had with this, but we also can't wipe the footage of you in the building, plugging in all that stuff, being as sneaky as she was, how long she was in the bathroom, etc., etc. So they can't do that if Angela doesn't get the Wi-Fi back on, so they can't get in, and stuff like this. And then she's just like, oh, damn it. And then she was gonna go to this place, but there's people there, and she just turns, and then she just goes down the stairs. And then finally we go back to Elliot in the hospital and stuff. Then again, we're talking about masters and control and stuff like this, and how Elliot just says things. And then he gets abducted again from his hospital bed. I was like, Lord Jesus, this kid. Such an abusive life for him. And then we go back to Angela, and Darlene is basically saying, okay, Angela, here's the plan. You go back to your cubicle. You have to put the USB in the back and stuff like this. Click F12 for that USB. Make sure you're downloading from it. Now that you're back in that cubicle, and then you type your codes and everything like this. And she's basically instructing on her what to do. And she's like, oh, like, I forgot something, like, blah, 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 and stuff. And then she's like, I forgot, like, where I was. And, like, I should do something at USA.com. And I was like, I see what Mr. Robot did. They're plugging in their stuff. And I'll insert another picture just so you guys can see what I'm talking about. And then the FBI, basically, lady interrupts her, Grace Gummer's character, Dominique Pirot. And then she's like, oh, were you in a call? Like, sorry, I hate when people do that to me. She's like, I'll just wait here for you to finish. Almost catching Angela in the act. Will Angela finish? Will she freeze up? Who knows what will happen to Angela now? And then we go again back to Elliot. He's in a basement, and Mr. Robot appears, and he's like, he's like, we got beat up because I tried to take the punches for you and stuff like this. And Elliot kind of hugs him, and he's like, thank you and stuff, and like a hug. And this is the part where I thought, like, we had like that live audience part. I'm like, you would probably just hear like a random "aww" part in the background. And then we go to Mr. Robot and little Elliot, and he's kind of beat up. And he's like, so I'm guessing by like, like your marks and stuff, like you didn't tell the principal your side of the story, etc., etc. So maybe Elliot was like a confrontational child who knows how he was in school. And then he's like, like it's just, let's just thank, time and everything like this, and everything will be gone eventually and stuff. Because Mr. Robot was basically fired from, his job at Evil Corp, just like Angela's mom had died and stuff like that. So he also mentions these dates, and Elliot is like, so what do those dates mean and stuff? And he's like, oh, well, they're like, like doctor's appointments. I'm going to get some blood work done and everything like this. He's like, can you just keep it to yourself and stuff? Because he also said, like, I was going to keep it from everyone, like Mom, Darlene, and you and stuff like this. And what he's basically trying to tell Elliot is, like, I'm sick, like, and obviously we know that his dad had cancer. His dad died of cancer thanks to Evil Corp and all those leaked files and stuff. And he's just like, like, just whatever, like, just never, just, I'll never leave you, and I'm always going to be here, kiddo, and stuff like this, like how he told him in the first season. He's like, I'm never going to leave you, like, I'm always going to be here. Obviously, the psychiatrist lady told Elliot, like, for better or for worse, he's a part of you, and he's there for a reason. This reason, possibly just to cope, two heads are better than one, so to speak, or thinking, like, what would Dad do? And then he's like, I promise you, like, again, I'm never going to leave you. And then he tells them, you know what, I'm going to open up a computer store and stuff, like, that's my new gig and everything. And he's like, oh, can I work there and everything like this and stuff? He's like, well, I suppose. And he tells them, well, your first assignment is that you have to come up with a name because every store needs a name and stuff. And then he's driving to that location. He's like, well, we can't get in and everything like this. I don't have the keys yet, etc., etc. And again, he tells him, can we just keep this between us? Obviously, Mr. Robot is telling Elliot, keep the fact that I'm sick, that I have cancer, just between us. Like, I trust you, I told you. Only we did see this in the first season when Elliot was kind of reliving his past and stuff when he saw how no one else knew Mr. Robot had cancer except him. And maybe that in a way messed him up, keeping the truth from everyone and stuff. I mean, eventually they all kind of, you find out with time, but Elliot was the first one that knew, and he probably knew more or less for like a while and stuff like this. And then he's like, well, here we are and stuff, like, well, it needs a name. He's like, the first thing that pops up in your mind. And that is where episode 6 ends. So again, please subscribe to me. It would really mean a lot to me. Like, rate, comment, and share. And also, again, I'll be linking the VR and the after show and basically a lot more in the little description box. And again, I'll insert those pictures. But also for next episode, we do see something about the truth being told. We see something about the restricted floor, which is Angela and Dominique Pirot. And then we do see that Price, the old man, is saying, sometimes people protect their secret evil agendas. Be that F Societies, the Dark Armies, Evil Corps, Price is specific, or, someone like White Roses. So again, that is the recap for Season 2, Episode 6 of Who is Mr. Robot. Again, please like, share, rate, comment, subscribe. It would mean so much if you want me to email them again to make a Funko Pop of Mr. Robot. Please tell me again in the comments, etc., etc., as redundant as I'm sounding. And thank you guys for watching. So anywho, I want to say hi to Rami Malek. Stay safe, and God bless you guys. Hi, Rami Malek.